Hi everyone, welcome to the Sewing Studio. It's Jeanette here with a very happy grin because I'm once again working on one of my scrap quilts, which, as you all know, I love to do. And I thought what we would do in this tutorial is layer it up. Now, I made a decision, if you've seen, let me just put it like that for a moment, that I've pieced all my units and I've added my border. So that's what I've been busy doing in between other things since you saw this last. And you'll notice I haven't put any of my hexagons on there yet, because my idea was that actually I'll piece it together. It's not a huge quilt. I'm going to piece it together, I'm going to put it onto the wadding, and then I'm going to stitch these down. So when I hand stitch these, applique them into the snowball blocks, one, it'll help secure those layers because my hand quilting or my hand stitching will be going through the layers. And also it'll add a little bit more of depth and dimension to those being attached there. So it'll also act as a little bit of quilting. So there was a little bit of method to my madness. They are sometimes a little bit more difficult to hand stitch down because of course you're working with all that bulk in your hand. But like I say, it's not a huge big quilt. So I think for this, it's going to work really well. So I thought what I would do is share with you how I layer up a quilt. Now we're working on this size, but it's the same technique that I use even if it's a big quilt. The only difference is that if I'm working on a big quilt, I've generally got a much bigger table that I'm working on. I generally take it up to my sewing group actually, where we can put 2 or 3 tables together and have a nice big work surface to do that on. But quite often, you know, I'll just layer the quilt up myself. I don't always have somebody else to help me. So what I've just done, just ahead of time, just because of you know how much room we've got here on camera, is I've just sort of roughly laid this out onto a piece of wadding. So it sort of comes down here over the edge of the table. And the piece of wadding, luckily, was a scrap that I had in my stash. And luckily, it's just big enough for this little quilt. Now, I'm just trying to remember how many blocks I did. I think we did 30. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, so I ended up making 30 blocks. So 15 of the 9 patch and 15 of the snowball. And we've done a tutorial on that, so we'll put a link in case any of you watching now haven't seen that one. So we're going to spray baste. It's my favourite method of layering up a quilt. I love it because everything lays really nice and flat and it stays for a long time. The only issue I've had with spray basting not working is where I've used a fabric that it tends to be more on the plain fabrics, the solid coloured fabrics, and it differs from manufacturer to manufacturer, but where they may have a dressing on them. Any fabric that has a dressing, the basting spray sometimes has a problem sticking that because of the dressing on the fabric. So if you're finding your spray basting isn't working and the layers aren't sticking together, you may need to wash the fabric if it's got a dressing on it. That's the only issue I've ever had with this method, so I thought I would just mention that one. So as I said, I've just sort of roughly laid it out. I've given my quilt top a good press with the iron, so everything's laying nice and flat to begin with. And then all I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this down, so I'm just going to make sure, one, we're nice in shot in camera, but also that I can sort of reach it without sort of bending over too much and getting my head in the way. So all I'm going to do is peel this back. Now, the other thing I do need to mention, because I've done a bit of preparatory work ahead of time, is I'm going to sort of point out some bits here where we've got these loose threads. And I like these little Fiskars scissors. They're really nice, sharp ones. Now, we do sell them here. I think we're waiting for some new stock to come in. So if you sort of fancy a pair of nice, sharp scissors, you can have a look on our website. I say those should be available, if not now, then very soon. But I like these because they are sharp right to the tip. Because what I need to do is just go in and very carefully just trim back any threads that may show through any of the lighter fabrics. We don't want those threads coming through, and I've done that ahead of time, but I particularly like those little scissors for that, because they're nice and small and sharp. But I say do that very carefully, because at this point we don't want to be cutting into our quilt and making holes in the quilt. But those scissors, because of the sharpness, I find they just do the trick lovely. So that's how it's going to be looking. So I've done that ahead of time. So all I'm going to do now is just work at a little section at a time. I'm going to pull that back, just take that up just so that I'm covering the mat, because I don't want to get spray on the mat. However, I will say it is washable. You can wash it off. It won't be there forever if you do. Now, health and safety. Always use the spray in a very well ventilated area. We've got doors and things open here, so we're nice and ventilated. So that is the first sort of safety precaution with that. And of course, if you've got any sort of breathing difficulties, be careful of using that. You might want to sort of mask up or something. But I find it's not too bad. It's not one that does a fine spray that sort of goes everywhere. So to use it, you give the can a nice little shake. Now, a few tips of when I'm using this. I find less is more. One of the big mistakes I find people make is they use too much. And when you use too much, it's sort of what I call puddles, and then it can come through your fabrics. But it's short, light sprays is much better than, it's not like the hairspray we used to put on our hair back in the 80s. You just want a nice, light spray. So I've given it a good shake ahead of time. And then you want to hold the can about 10 inches away from the batting. Like I say, open windows, open doors, do it in a nice big airy room. Some people even take it outside and do it. And then we want short, sharp bursts about 10 inches away. So you can sort of see there. And I'm standing back, so I'm not right over those fumes. And that'll very quickly just sort of settle down onto the quilt. Now, I just leave it for a few seconds. So if you have got any moisture there through the spray, that tends to evaporate. So that now should be tacky. And all I'm going to do is take my quilt and just smooth it out. Now I tend to sort of smooth side to side, and just the warmth of your hands will help smooth everything down nice and flat. And then I tend to work towards myself. And once we've got that section, I'm going to move the whole quilt up, and I'm going to peel this bottom section back until, I need to pull it a little bit that way, until I meet the bit where it's begun to stick. And I can also feel it as I'm folding that back. I can see where it's still sticking to there. I'm just going to flatten the wadding out. But like I say, just be mindful of using this. I know we always get lots of comments. But you can see how little I'm using there. You don't need huge amounts. Less is definitely more. So I'm just going to leave that for a couple of seconds. And then once again, I'm just going to layer it. Now the spray is repositionable. So if you don't get it down and right first time, you can go back. But I've layered quilts, large quilts like that. And I've sort of left them 4 or 5 years before I've managed to get round to quilting them. And all the layers have still been stuck together. So it's a really good way. Right, I can feel the stick is pulling there. So once again, I'm going to give it a little shake, stand back a little bit. Less is definitely more, and so you can always add. You can't take it away, but you can always add a little bit more. And then I can just move the quilt up again. Now, if I was working on a big quilt, as well as moving it up and down, you can be moving it side to side as well, and the spray will hold it. Now you can see here, this is a bit of a funny shaped piece of wadding, but it fits. And because I'm going to be quilting it on my home sewing machine, now I'm taking away any loose threads. We don't want those underneath. Yeah, I don't need huge amounts of wadding around the edge because I'm going to be possibly hand or machine quilting this. And then the final bit, I'm just going to move that down so I'm not getting stick all over our lovely mat. And then just the last bit. So you can just see how little I'm using there. And then the final bit. Right there. And that is layered. So all I'm going to do now is just check that everything's laying nice and flat. And it is, so I'm really happy with that. So it's gone down really quickly, really easily. I'm going to put the cap back on to my can there, move out the way. Now, I'm not going to put the backing on yet. I'm going to wait until I've put my hexagons on, and then I'll be doing the backing, but I'll add the backing exactly the same way. And because we will have stitched this into place, the top will be nice and secure when we come to put the backing on as well. So as I said, I will repeat that process when it is time to put the backing on. So let's put that away, and I'm going to get my hexagons out and show you now how I'm going to put the hexagons on. Okay, so we're all set up here. Now I just want to share with you my favourite needles when I'm English paper piecing, and also anytime I'm doing applique, and it's these lovely black gold, let me put that under the close-up actually, these lovely black gold needles by Clover. And they're just so sharp and lovely. You have to be a little bit careful because they're so sharp, but they just glide through the fabric really nice and smoothly. And I just absolutely love them. Now you can get them in different sizes. This here is a pack of number 9. Sorry, I was looking for the size and it was right there. So black gold applique sharps, different sizes, different lengths, but you know, just go for something that's got a fairly decent eye on it. So I'm just going to open this pack here. I went out into the shop and grabbed a new pack. I'm getting low actually on these. I'm really quite rough on needles, and I used to use a milliner's, but I find I snap those. But these are a bit more robust. I think I've lost more than I've snapped for these. So they're a nice strong needle as well. So that suits me. So I've just got my length of thread here. And I've just picked a red that matches in with the colour, and hopefully I can, thread that needle. Now I'm just going to do a quilter's knot. Let me just show you for any new quilters. Now the way I do it is you lay your thread horizontally across your finger, and then you make a cross or a plus sign with your needle, and then just hold it there and wrap your thread. I'm just going to do a few times round, and then you just want to pinch where those wraps are and hold that between your thumb and your finger, and then just push your needle up through, keeping hold of the wraps. Just keep pulling straight up, and then you'll have a nice little quilter's knot on the end. And that's the knot that we use when we're doing hand quilting. So because I've got my wadding underneath, I can stitch. Now I think I've decided I'm going to position these so they're all sort of facing in the same orientation. So I've got my flat edges of my hexagon here. Now I'm just eyeballing the centre. Now if you want to be really precise, you could find the centre of that block. I don't feel I need to be that precise with it. Now I'm just going to get a pin. Now these flathead flower pins are a bit stronger and a bit sturdier, and these have been designed more for going through all your layers, including the wadding, rather than the thinner sort of glass head pins, which are a lot finer, which can bend a lot more. So these are a lot more robust to go through the wadding. So that's definitely what those pins are sort of made for. I don't tend to piece with those in. And I'm just going to get a couple more needles. Now you could glue that down, either using a glue pen or some Roxanne's basting glue or something like that. Now I'm just going to put a couple more pins. Now, actually, before I do that, let's not get too excited. I've got my nice little sharp scissors here, and I'm just going to, because at the moment I've still got the papers in, but I am going to take the papers out. So I'm just going to take away, and that's why I leave the knot, when I'm doing English paper piecing, I leave the knot of my thread on top so that I don't have to be fishing around underneath. And I'm going to take that centre paper out. But the rest I'm going to leave in for now, and I'm going to take them out as I go. So I'm going to start, I think I'm going to start here. And I'm just going to come up from behind. I'm going to try and hold that. It's a bit tricky to do. And I'm going to come up. So it's right in the corner of that piece of fabric. So the knot is where the wadding is. Now I'm just going to swizzle that quilt just a little bit, just to make it easier for me to sew, but try and stay under the camera. Right, there we are. And then I'm just going to, stab myself with a pin. That's one pin too many. Sorry, let's just put that back in because that's holding my centre. Let's just double pin it, right. So now I'm just going to sort of bunch the quilt up in my hand, keeping everything as flat as I can. And then I'm going to do a nice little invisible. It's really hard trying to do it on camera so you can all see what I'm doing. Made it a little bit difficult for myself. So I'm taking my needle right down where that thread has come out, and I think Katrina did a little tutorial about invisible slip stitch, and that's what I'm using here. And I'm just coming right out on that fold. But these needles are great for this because they are so sharp. Now I'll just work, oh well, I've just unthreaded that. Let me just rethread that again. I'm just going to work round, and then when I get to where I start to take the papers out, I'll just carry on working till I get to that point, and then I'll show you what I do to take the papers out. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I've gone round two sides of my hexagon. I'm just going to put my needle in my fabric there. I'm going to get my little scissors and I'm going to leave the paper in there. Now, I'll just explain. One of the reasons I leave the papers in is because it keeps that shape a lot better. It keeps your sides nice and straight, but it also keeps the whole flower shape a lot better. You can take all the papers out and applique glue it down and do it that way, and then of course the applique glue, but I tend to do it like this. But you just sort of choose the method that works well for you. There's lots of different ways of doing it. But yeah, I've done it like this for a long time really. And then I'm going to just take that pin out, fold that back, and then I'm just going to pinch that paper out. So I just sew one down, take the paper out, sew two sides, take the paper out, and I just go around the whole of the flower shape doing that. So let's just finish that little bit off there, and then you'll begin to see it all coming together. So I've got some nice bits of hand sewing that I can sort of sit there and do either in the afternoon, at weekends, or in the evenings. Quite often I like to have something to do that occupies my mind and uses my hands basically. So this is my therapy, my quiet. Might put an audiobook on sometimes and stitch to that. But I can almost instantly feel how much calmer I get when I hand stitch. And there we are, we'll just finish that there. And I'll take my needle off so I'm not poking myself with it. Put it somewhere safe for a minute. So you can see there, that's that shape beginning to come down. So I'm going through all the wadding, so it's beginning to secure it to the wadding. It'll add a little bit more depth and dimension to that shape, and it will give me many hours of enjoyable hand sewing where I just sort of sit quietly in my chair and get these done. So hopefully by the time you see this next, I'll have all the shapes down. I may bring it back again because I'm just deciding how I'm going to quilt it, and I'm thinking I might do a little bit of hand quilting on this with some embroidery thread, just sort of echoing the shapes of the flowers. But I tend to sort of do the next step and then look at it again and decide where it's going to go. But I'm thinking that's maybe the direction that it goes in. So I hope you've enjoyed following along with this project. I hope you enjoyed seeing it here now with how it's beginning to look, it's beginning to take shape. It's come together really quite quickly. And I love the fact that a lot of this fabrics was all the red scraps I was given, even the border fabric was a piece of fabric I was given. So it's utilising all those scraps. So rather than languishing in a box or a drawer somewhere, they're actually going into a lovely little quilt, which I think is going to look amazing once I've finished it. Am I allowed to say that about my own sewing? I think I can. So thank you for joining me today. Like I say, hopefully you'll see this again when we come to do some quilting on it and sort of finishing off the binding. I think it would be a nice one to sort of follow all the way along really. So hopefully it won't take me too long to get the hexagons onto it, and I hope you'll join us for that at some point in the future. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you'll join us again here next time in the sewing studio.